Well, we started several weeks ago with the opening statement. The Tao is basically utterly open. And we spent some time back then just experiencing what does it mean even to be, to look out at the world or to be utterly open. And that's kind of tricky because there's nothing we can do to be utterly open because that's a little bit less than open. There's a little bit of contrivance. So we hear all these different teachings. The most subtle teachings always say no contrivance, no contrivance. So I thought we might just explore that a little bit before moving on. So here's a little kind of a koan for you. Um, don't breathe and don't not breathe. Just be utterly open and see what happens. Don't breathe, don't not breathe. Just be utterly open and see what happens. What do you notice? What's happening? Anybody?
Yeah. Oh, I guess we're on audio. I wanted to breathe. I was holding my breath. I was saying breathe and don't not breathe, and then I held my
Don't
breath
not
for a little.
breathe. So you
Yeah,
so
I
you tried
wanted
to
to
not
breathe.
breathe, huh? So you couldn't follow that instruction?
So
How did everybody else do? Yeah, it's interesting how the mind takes an invitation to be totally open and it turns it into some kind of a shutdown. Would it be anyone else? Yeah,
So
Phoebe.
I said, don't breathe. And immediately I said, are you kidding? So I went to the next sentence, which said, don't not breathe, which is a double negative. So that means breathe, breathe and be. So that's where I went with it.
Oh, would it be clearer if I said don't try to breathe, don't try to not breathe? Michelle, you want to try that
yeah,
again? Take two. Let's do it again. Don't try to breathe and don't try to not breathe. And see what happens. Where we get hung up is there a lot of things that we're not responsible for. It's just the way things are that we try to take responsibility for. Okay. It's like, so he's been saying, just notice the way of things. He says, notice the way of things and follow the course of nature. What happens if we're not trying to breathe and we're trying to not breathe?
just being. Yeah,
Yeah, and then what happens if you're just being? Were you breathing or weren't you?
I was breathing.
Okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to breathe because that is the nature of things. As human beings, or as living beings, we breathe. So we're going to breathe, whether we try to breathe or if we don't interfere with that. But it's just a way of saying, oh, follow the course. Just be. If we're utterly open, we will notice, as it says, notice the way of things. Okay, and let that be. So there's not some kind of drastic turnaround or change. It's not a matter of opposites. Either I'm making my world be like this or I'm making my world be the opposite. And again, it always keeps coming back down to relax and be utterly open. If I'm relaxing and be utterly open, my nature is going to manifest. The nature or the way of things will manifest, and I will be in harmony with it. In this particular instance, it means I'm just here breathing. So you might see if there are uh, other parallels to that in your life. How do we relax and be utterly open? We also did some exercises with openness in terms of looking out at the world with openness, meaning we're not projecting anything in our vision, we're not labeling, we're not even presuming to know really what anything is. Okay. We're just allowing everything to be what it is without having to know it. And I encourage you not to feel like you have to be writing, because if you want to review this, I can send you the video. To look out at the world, or to look out even, as if we're just giving a chance for everything to tell us what it is. And instead of trying to kind of gobble things up with our minds, cleverness, oh, that's this, that's that, just relax it all, let it flow out, and let the world, in a sense, drink us in, rather than us trying to consume everything that's out there. Give it over. So we could call it soft focus. We've also used several mantras. One is soften into everything. That might be one way. When I look at something, I don't create a hard shape around it and give it a name, nor do I create a hard distance between what I think is myself and what I think is that thing. I just allow my awareness to soften into what is arising. And I'll find I'm perfectly aware, I'm perfectly functional, I'm perfectly open. But I'm relaxing something that's very habitual that I'm usually not even aware of, right? Which is that I chronically look out at the world through the screen of my associations, my naming, my projection, right? I do it very smoothly. I'm very competent that I can go through my whole life and I just simply know what everything is. That's fine. But if I want to explore the nature of openness, it's nice to watch how to watch that and to notice, because in that place of openness is where I can go to the next place of contemplative depth, or the next place of awareness. It's the next place where I can let another level of knowing begin to enter me, so to speak, because I'm not always reinforcing the level of knowing that I do so well, that I'm always on. So to soften in our contemplation, our meditation, we can begin to soften, and as an exercise, we can do it, during the day. What's it like to just, you say, drop everything and let it be? But there are different ways we understand this, But one way is with our awareness. Drop how we organize and own things in our awareness, and just let awareness be an open light, part of our open light of being, in which everything is arising, you might say, within its own open light. It's only when I do that that I'm going to have a chance to discover that we're both aspects of that same light, that same light is shining in a kind of one whole arising of light and being. The tendency of the mind, which we'll talk about more, is to encircle everything. Encircle the difference between me and everything else, and encircle everything else. It's a very, it's a skill, it's a talent, it's a creative talent. It's something we're able to do. And there's nothing wrong with it, except that's only one level of our potential way we can operate. And it's a level that often gets us into trouble because we get so fixed in our representations and so identified with them that it often, including as we see everywhere in the world, our naming of things, our attributing of qualities to things, our stories about things that divide us from each other, and also limit the openness with which we can experience life. Right? We reduce it to our particular, set of conditioning. In the short term, it's functional, but if we want to open up the full dimension of what we are as conscious human beings, and a dimension that is intrinsically more whole making, and ultimately more satisfying, then one of the things we have to begin to learn is to relax that and practice that kind of of openness of awareness, and openness of, I'm not quite sure what word to use, openness of intent. I'm not trying to hold it together so much. Another image that might be helpful, which is used a lot, is the image of a mirror. Mirror-like awareness. A mirror reflects everything that comes in front of it, but it doesn't name, it doesn't have an opinion, it doesn't pick and choose, it's not partial. Let's see. If the thing is there, it's reflecting in the mirror. And there's nothing that's missed. It doesn't say, and the mirror doesn't have a comment about it, doesn't have an opinion about it, but it's doing its job perfectly. So there's a way that our awareness can work in that way, and therefore become more open, because I'm not selecting according to certain old habit patterns. There are things I routinely miss, right? I miss in my relationships, and I miss as I walk through the world. But you can practice, again, another meditation you can do is just practicing being that mirror. And that is also related to what we've been talking about the last week or so, the Zen practice of silent illumination, right? We said illumination is just the natural illuminating quality of the awareness that illuminates everything that comes before it. And the silent means the mind is not adding anything. The thinking mind is not adding commentary, it's not adding judgment, it's not adding any reactivity, it's not adding distraction. It's just quiet. Thinking mind is quiet, and the awareness is illuminating. And it's just in the same way. In other words, if anything comes before it, I'm sitting here, if there's a sound, my awareness illuminates it. If there's a sensation in my body, my awareness illuminates it. If there are objects in the room, my awareness is illuminating them. I'm not, if I get distracted by a thought, my awareness can illuminate that rather than keep getting caught up in the thought. I can notice the whole process. So it's a subtle process, but as we practice over time, we become better at being that mirror of awareness, that illuminating mirror. And that would be an example of openness, right? A couple of the other mantras we've worked with, that in a sense you might call them mirror mantras, is the one about let go, let be, and let in. And that's something that a mirror does. It's not holding on to anything. It's not grabbing after anything. It's not picking and choosing. It's just letting everything be what it is, and just letting everything in. Or if you have a thought come up, or if you have an opinion come up, it's all right, just let go and let it be. And let it in. Notice that happened. Don't grab on and ride it to the end of the world. Just let it be. Let go, let be, let in. So when we practice in this way, including when we do the silent illumination practice, we're not even making a distinction between what we normally call inside or outside, inside my body or outside, or inside my head or outside. Because if I relax that level of labeling, then everything that's arising in my mirror-like awareness is equal. It's simply arising in the field of my awareness. I'm not distinguishing between, oh, that's coming from the inside, that's coming from my head, that's coming from the outside. I'm relaxing and just allowing the whole field of phenomena, of experience to arise and flow. And then that begins to become very integrative because I begin to experience that unified field of being, that awareness and being present for that unified field is very integrating. And as the next level, we talk about coherence. There's a coherence between these different dimensions. There's not inside clashing with outside. There's just an open field of awareness. Well, again, and Taoism makes this very clear, there's a natural mode of human functioning, and part of that natural mode of functioning is to make these distinctions, to come up with labels and to come up with ideas and analysis and learned experience that we apply to the present. And we can engage that every day, and that's natural and helpful. But as I said, the problem is, which Taoism then also talks about, is we leave ourselves, the nature of that process is that it leaves us very open to getting locked in a one-sided way of approaching things, or of misconstruing the greater reality, including what our author refers to as the interbeing of things, the interrelatedness of everything, and the way we each inhabit each other, and all things inhabit each thing. This is a strange way of talking to our normal point of view or experience, but all the deepest teachings are pointing to this as an actual experience. It's not a weird experience of, oh, I'm living inside your body and you're living inside my body. It's just an opening, deepest sense that there's an essential being that we share, and not only share, but inhabit as one. And that essential nature, that essential openness, is what inhabits and is the deepest level of our being, and the deepest level of our shared being. Right? And we need, with all our cleverness and the other areas, we need access to that. We need to understand the harmony of that, because that's what really begins to create peace in our souls and peace on earth, which seems like a strange concept. Peace on earth. So again, all this is reflecting and bouncing off of all the different things we've been reading so far, that's talking about the natural unfolding of life, the natural unfolding even of conditioning, that all of this is pure because it's all still, in a sense, arising from the same light, but we get distracted from it because we get lost in our relative naming of things. And even the naming of things is not the problem, is that we get identified with it and we limit our understanding to that. We limit our understanding to our unique partial conditioning that contributes to our unique belief in how the world is and the values we acquire, etc., which often is much less than a harmonious understanding of how we're here together. And much less understanding of how to, you might say, be more relaxed and at one with the nature of things. And so, as we also said, we suffer. We talk about dukkha. We talked about that axle hole that's off center on the wheel of life, because we're trying to make our point of view be the center, whereas life is the center, right? Being is the center, which happens more as we begin to relax and understand that we are participating and sharing in one mutual being. We're going to tend to respond with that being more at the center. Going back to our first exercise with the breath, if I'm trying to breathe or trying to not breathe, I'm going to be off center either way. My mind is going to get me all tangled with that. But if I relax and open, neither breathing nor not breathing, then I'm just breathing. Or life is breathing, right? I'm breathing because that's what life does. It's not me trying to figure out whether to breathe or not breathe. So I hope these are illustrations that make sense and that you can use some of them as a kind of an exercise to work with to explore those shifts of awareness. Okay. Oh, the one other mantra that we work with that I think we need to explore at greater length. We've touched on it before, but it's also a mirror-like mantra, and that's the mantra, give it away. In other words, whatever we're holding on to, whatever we're clutching, whether it's an opinion, whether it's a point of view, whether it's an emotion, whether it's our joy, or whether it's something we're hung up on, give it away. Don't clutch it to yourself. Right? It will unfold, it will resolve, it will heal if we give it away, which means let it fly off from us in a way. The way a mirror, we talked about the mirror being open and taking everything in, but it also freely gives everything away. That's the other side of it. Freely let it in, freely give it away. It never gets to congest and stick, okay, and create all these fixations that we're then trying to manage. So, it's often we say in Buddhist practice, if we have had, we've meditated, we've accumulated some peace or some stillness, and we say, offer it to all beings, give it away. So we're not clutching it to ourselves and therefore, in a sense, making ourselves smaller. Give it away because we're in dedication to our interrelatedness with everything. But almost paradoxically, if I've got some kind of hang-up, some emotional pain or perseveration that I'm working with, or even on physical pain, everything, we can give that away. Because all pain, all discomfort, they're all places where energy is contracting. We're holding it. There's a fixation there that we're trying to wrestle with or release. Even physical pain is a place where the energy is not flowing freely. Okay. So if I give it away, I'm actually freeing up the energy of that state to become more open, to become more free. And you can experiment with this too. Because you'll notice if I have a pain, let's say in my shoulder, my first tendency is going to be to kind of contract with it, or hold it. Physically, we splint it, right? And then in my mind, I say, oh, there's that shoulder thing. And so I'm creating a greater density and fixation around the very thing that's making me off balance. Whereas if I give it away, okay? If it's a pain sensation, let the pain sensation just kind of radiate off. If I'm feeling fear or sorrow, and I notice that emotion, that sensation, I usually hold on to it and create a story around it, and it perseverates. What if I just said, oh, okay, here, universe, take it, and just imagine the energy flying out. I'm not denying the emotion, I'm just letting it radiate. Once it starts radiating, the energy begins to flow and release. Again, it becomes less binding, right? It's not bypassing. I can feel sadness, and I can let that sadness radiate, give it away. And I'm not denying the sadness, but now it's beginning to change a form. It's taking a form over which it's not fixated, not being held. And so in a sense, I'm releasing also my energy, right? It's because it's my energy that holds things to myself, that holds an emotion there. or that holds my body tight, or that holds a point of view. There's a lot of contraction going on to make up how I structure my life. And that contraction restricts the flow of energy. And as we're learning, in this Taoist study, the flow of energy, the flow of awareness, and the flow of form and body and vitality and spirit, they're all part of the same. If I'm restricting the flow of energy, I'm also going to be restricting the openness of my mind. My mind's going to be more fixated and stuck. I always say a lot of our thinking is just stuck energy in the body. We try to wrestle in our meditation to stop thinking so much. But if we let the energy begin to flow, the thoughts don't begin to accumulate and pile up because they're all part of one flow. So I'm kind of here recreating, pointing out different things in my own words that really what our author in this series has been telling us along. We'll go back and review that one more time. Okay. Which we'll do right now. Are there any questions about, or you want to follow up on anything I've been talking about today? Okay. So our author of the Book of Balance and Harmony says, the Tao is basically utterly open. Utter openness has no substance. It ends in endlessness. It begins in beginninglessness, meaning it's beyond our capacity to nail it down and fix it and create conditions and definitions around it. Buddhism might refer to it as prajnaparamita also. When openness culminates, it transforms into spirit, and spirit changes to produce energy, and energy masses into form, and the one divides into two. So he said this is a simple recounting of creation at this metaphysical level. Openness, when openness fully manifests its nature, it's said, in Buddhism says the characteristics of reality is this essential openness of being that's also awake and aware. So there's openness or emptiness, this essential essence of being, which is open and empty. It's awake and aware, has the quality of awareness, and it has a quality of energy, or creative energy, or sometimes translated as all-pervading in its capacity. Right? The capacity of this empty openness and awareness is to pervade everywhere and manifest as everything. So when we say this openness transforms into spirit, we said again by spirit is that fundamental level of awakeness or awareness that also resides in us, but largely hidden, because in us it takes the form of a kind of a shrunken awareness that's self or ego-centered, right? And yet we know that when we talk about the spirit in us, it's that higher, we sometimes talk about our higher power. And that higher power is also our higher awareness. It's a higher level of reality and understanding that's inherently more non-dual and integrating. So spirit changes to produce, and then spirit, or this awareness, also then manifests as energy. And energy says masses into form or begins to display. I would say that this nature of awareness is because it is energetic. And so the energy is really one with the awareness, and the energy culminates and produces all kinds of arrays of form. So although he says masses into it, this or that, I think we could say that each is displaying that or the aspect of itself. And if we come from this side, where we are identified with our form, right, and we then make lots of based a lot of sense of separation based on seeing a separate form. And then we get stuck into these different patterns, mental patterns that then shut down our energy, you see. And then we may experience imbalances in the body that are also an expression of that imbalance or stuckness of energy. This is basic to understanding of Chinese medicine. If on the other side I relax and open my awareness and come into a whole or more open awareness, I'm also freeing up my flow of energy. Well, conversely, as when we practice Qigong, part of what we're doing is freeing up the flow of energy along with the awareness. We begin to see that there's no separation. The openness of my energy, the openness of my awareness, and then even my perception of form. Not only has that become more relaxed and open, but that I begin to realize that all of my form is the arising of energy. All of my form is, one way of talking about it is just at the level of my mind is becoming progressively released from its fixation on form to being to energy to awareness. Let's see. When my awareness is relaxed and open, it's not making distinctions, but I may feel the energy, I may feel the joy, I may feel the fullness, the vitality, as the Taoists would say, of being here in the world and in life. Because vitality is a natural part. The spirit, vitality, open awareness, they're all part and parcel of each other. And they are all natural expressions prior to this playful creation of separate forms, which he goes on to say, it all inhabit each other, all express each other. Okay, so it's a vision of life. It's undoing our knottedness around separation, contraction, fixation, and beginning to give us progressively wider, more relaxed, more open context for which to be in life and for which to be in our own awareness. And then he says the one divides into two, right? So this openness manifests, culminates in the awareness, which also expresses as energy, which then expresses as form or appearance. And at that point, the one divides into two. It does that in two respects, I think, as I think about it. One is that at that point, because there's this playfulness of, say, yin and yang, of this play of opposites, that's part of this creative play out of which everything is constructed. So now this oneness is now expressing itself as two-ness, which is not separate from the oneness. It's just now expressing itself in this as part of its way of playing as two-ness. It's also dividing into two because at this point, awareness enters into a stage where it has a tendency also to create a separation within itself. And instead of experiencing this universal field of awareness, it experiences as self and other. Okay, Buddhism talks about this very clearly as the arising of what's called manas, which is the thinking mind. And it describes manas as it's like drawing a line in space. There's totally open, empty space. There's totally open, empty awareness. But awareness does this little playful trick of drawing a line in the middle of the openness and saying, from now on, everything on that side of the line is everything else, and everything on this side of the line is, I'm going to call me. All right. So now I've divided the world into two, and then to reinforce separate me, I'm going to start building up my own separate ideas about everything that contribute to my separate idea of me. So you say, oh, what a terrible thing to have happen. It was all just openness and joy and happiness and energy. Why did this happen? And, of course, there are some spiritual traditions that will attribute it to the influence of evil. That's the evil thing of trying to undo God's beautiful work. But the non-dual traditions, uh, Buddhism and Taoism, and actually we can cite a lot of the mystics in Christianity who see through that dualism too, uh, say that this apparent arise of illusion is not because of some awful, terrible thing coming from some other source. It's part of the natural process of the energy itself, of the arising energy of the playfulness. It's true we get stuck, but we have ways of getting unstuck. And that's what all the teachings are trying to tell us. Okay. So Longchenpa, one of the greatest of the Tibetan Buddhist masters, has a beautiful metaphor for this, which I may have shared with you before, I don't remember. He says, how come, you have this light, all this beautiful innate light and source of being and spirit, and how does it give birth to ignorance? And he says, consider the sun. Okay, the sunlight is just pure radiant warmth and light. And so it's the energetic expression of the sun, of awareness and of empty being. The sunlight is coming down to earth, and it's the warmth of the sunlight is raising the water vapors from the ocean, right? Because of the warmth, there's vapor rising, and vapor gathers in the atmosphere, and those vapors eventually create clouds, and those clouds obscure the sunlight. So now we're cut off. Now we're in ignorance of the sun because of these clouds, but the sun created those clouds as part of the natural process. At the same time, the sun will continue to shine even if we're ignorant of it, and it will affect the winds and the flow of energy in the atmosphere, and it'll dissipate the clouds, and then the sun will be there again, as we all get to experience sometimes in this winter. Okay. So what that's saying is that this is part of the play, and it's there, it comes up in different forms in all religions. There's an aspect of fundamental being which is just complete and whole in itself. There's also an aspect of this fundamental being that is playful and creative and generates every possibility, including possibilities that kind of cloud its own nature and, relatively speaking, can get us, our awareness, stuck. And thirdly, it has a nature that continues to work to release and unfold that and awaken all of that back to the original being or original truth. These are not three thought out things. These are just three aspects, okay, of what's happening all the time. We, as individuals, are embody all of that because we're not other than that. We are a kind of a small level of that awareness working in our relative way, that energy, that openness. And we're at that place where we have a choice to learn. We have a choice to stay caught in the ignorance and create patterns that reinforce our ignorance and of the clouds of ignorance. Or we can choose to begin to awaken and re-experience the sunlight again. But it's that sunlight itself working in us that opens our pathway that way, and that even helps provide the information that we need to make those choices. And yet ultimately we have to, in a sense, choose by allowing ourselves to be open, allowing ourselves to learn, allowing ourselves in principle to not be attached to our fixation and our stuckness, which only reinforces our separation and our ignorance, but to begin to relax and release and open and soften into everything and let go and let be and let in, okay? And to release and give away rather than clutch and hold. And all of our different spiritual practices are really trainings in doing all of that, right? In systematically releasing the mind's attachment to these different holding patterns and fixations. As you know, there are so many practices that support us in that. Yet the fact that they exist at all, these practices and these supports, are just as innate to the original light as the clouds that come in and then distract us. One of the ways we get caught and fixated in our separateness is to say, well, that's not fair. Why did it do it that way so that we have to suffer? Okay. That's an understandable point of view for us children who feel like daddy didn't treat us right or something like that because he created a world in which we could be ignorant. But that's part of our ignorance to do that. We can do that, but that's just simply reifying the victim position, right? It's part of the ignorance rather than saying, wait a minute, I am that. There's no daddy that's not my own self-nature, you see. And as long as I have an axe to grind with the world or with, I think, God, I'm going to continue to act out in a reactionary way, right, to my life. And I'm going to keep my fit, is like they say, the child who holds his breath till he gets what he wants, which is kind of what we're doing. We're holding everything down. The moment I say, wait a minute, I am the one who can choose in the next moment to open, to relax, to begin to open, to see and to experience, to release, to let my love into the world, to begin to have that capacity to, as we said, to bless or to love, or to affirm this moment and to open to it rather than to shut it down and to judge. I'm the only one who can make that choice. That's the point at which we begin to take adult responsibility, right, for our lives, for our spiritual lives. And that adult responsibility begins to allow me to grow now as an adult rather than hold the child position. And the natural course of growing as an adult is to unfold back into my true being, ultimately, which is all of this to begin with, is quote unquote God to begin with, you see. So with duality, there is a sensing. And with the sensing, there is a pairing of yin and yang in mutual interaction. The creative and the receptive establish their positions. Movement and stillness alternate, meaning they're continually flowing back and forth together. There's the natural give and take. It's the natural polarity of being. Prior to that, there's just this oneness that can't even be named. Now there's play. And I talked about it at the opening of Tai Chi, reproduces this from oneness to now play. Creativity, receptivity, vitality, and spirit interdepend, right? They're all aspects of each other, and they're all now coming into the play of this creative form that's the natural flow of life that we call this creation, this earth creation. Heaven created earth, okay? Meaning the initial oneness manifested as initial two-ness, which are manifested as everythingness. And the perfection of that, the heaven, never went anywhere, right? The Taoists call it early heaven and late heaven. Longchenpa says, he said, one perfect, two perfect, all perfect. There's nothing wrong here. It's all perfect. But we're capable at that point of getting confused, right? The Taoists say at that point the feedback loops, and we lose the sense that we are in heaven, right? Have you noticed that? Have you lost that sense? So again, when we open, there's another way of talking about it, is when we when we simply open up and let things speak to us, let life arise and speak to us. When we do our silent illumination, when we begin to open to an increasingly integrated experience of what this is, what we're really doing is beginning to, in different using different words, beginning to allow heaven to announce itself to us, to allow the underlying unity, openness, and radiance of things to begin to enter our awareness, right? And the innate harmony of things. Okay, so that we see that the harmony of the yin and the yang that's being manifested by the oneness maintains the harmony, and everything that's been created is an innate harmony, is an expression of the Tao if we learn to go with it. And these teachings are the Tao teaching us this is how to go with it. All the spiritual teachings are this, right? So all these things, movement, stillness, attraction, accord, connect with the operation of our essence, of sense, of innate vitality, and will, the area of choice, right, also is all connected to this, so that there is a consistency establishing the seasons of the life cycle. All right, there's this creative play. It's a harmonic play, but it consists of all these different things. It's not just radiant light. It's that too, but now it's manifesting as all of this, the yin and the yang of everything. How do we come into harmony with that as an expression of the one harmony? Okay. This is the life cycle. A harmonious process of distillation sustains origination. I think this is what we were talking about last week. A harmonious process of distillation sustains origination and production. In other words, there's one transformative power that sustains, that is both the same, the originating energy and the energy that produces, all right, or the reality that produces. On earth, it distributes, in heaven, at the heavenly level, it distributes the various forms on earth, creates everything. And on earth, it nurtures all living things, right? And this is what I think we spoke of at some length last week. That the same nurturing process, the same innate, the innate process doesn't come from a diabolical, let's see what those human beings do when we create them kind of thing, you know. There is one unified openness and love energy manifesting itself through all of it. And it's the same love energy that creates everything, is the same love energy that's nurturing everything and trying to bring everything into its fullness of being, which is ultimately back to the realization of the original oneness. Kwang-Tsu, who is a Taoist, a wonderful Taoist philosopher some years after Lao Tzu, he says something to the effect of something like things reach their culmination or their fullness of being as they de-become. So in other words, everything becomes what it is, but this process of de-becoming its separateness, is part of its process of coming to its full maturity as it becomes one with everything again. Okay. It occurred to me, now in the Christian tradition, about this whole idea, this equivalent to this Taoist statement, that in heaven it distributes the various forms, and on earth it nurtures all living beings, the same loving energy. Dame Julian of Norwich, great, wonderful Christian mystic who wrote his book called Revelations of Divine Love. And we did a long series on her a whole many years ago. And I might eventually put that up on our website too. One of her famous sayings, actually, when referring to God is, when I guess it's the famous incident or the story about her feeling this little glimmering. She experienced in one of her mystical experiences this little small shimmering object in the palm of her hand. It was described as like the size of a little hazelnut. And she realized that this was all of creation that she was seeing. And what she was being given to know, to understand, as she held this image of creation in her palms, is God madeth it, God keepeth it, God loveth it. Okay. The same power that generated it maintains it and loves it into fullness of being. So it's the same, mystical experience is really the same insight, okay, the same experience. Forms all contribute to one another. We're just really coming back to where we left off last time with a lot of extra commentary. Forms all contribute to one another. Beings are immanent in one another, and thus evolution and development go on without end. Okay, so let's come back to here. Naturally, if from this understanding that there's one inherent reality, sometimes described as a holographic reality, expressing itself as everything, but never ceasing to be itself, and that the whole is present in each. Not only is the whole present in each part of the manifestation, but each part of the manifestation includes the whole, and which means includes each other. Right? So we are immanent in each other. Forms are immanent in each other. Beings are immanent in one another. Forms contribute to one another. Right. So the other image that is very well known from Hindu mythology, and the Buddhists also use it, is the image of Indra's net, which you may be aware of. This net is described as this infinite jeweled net. It's an infinite net of being, and at every tie of that net is a jewel. Right? So this is this one net that interweaves everything, and at every place of intersection there's a jewel, and that jewel is reflecting the rest of the net, including every other jewel, and including every other jewel reflecting every other jewel. You see? So everything in any given place, including us, we are reflecting the whole of everything, including I'm reflecting you, which includes reflecting you, reflecting the whole of everything, which is already including everything else that's reflecting the whole of everything. So if you really follow through on that image, again, it's beyond the mind. It's this infinite, everything containing everything else, everything immanent in everything else. And this is not just meant to be a kind of a literary metaphor. This is an attempt to convey really the reality of things. And the mind can play with it and say, well, that's a fascinating picture. Or it can say, this doesn't correspond to anything I can imagine or think. But again, even before we have some kind of mystical experience in which we experience this directly, we can allow these images to, as we said, we can always use everything to help us to relax. To say, oh, okay, what would it be like to feel that immanent holding, that oneness with everything? Even if I'm not experiencing it tactily, perhaps, How would it change my operating strategy, my desperation, my separation, etc.? If I begin to take to heart any of these teachings, if I can begin to use any of them to allow myself to relax. And of course, just as a side note, modern physics is telling us, the same thing. The nothingness, quote unquote, that gives birth spontaneously to everything, that generates the energetic fields that then generate form, but are ultimately nothing. And that create a kind of a holographic reality. There's a lot of talk about the holographic nature of the whole universe. And that's increasingly being used as a way of explaining a lot of phenomena that scientists are trying to make sense of. And just to complete one more section that takes us again to what we covered last week, everything in the world arises in being. Everything arises in being, which is not a thing, it's utter openness. Everything is arising in this utter openness. Being arises in non-being. Okay. We could say that everything arises out of nothing, but even more than that, it's saying all these concepts, because that other openness is beyond concepts and beyond categories and beyond division. This whole thing of being and non-being, you can just easily call it either one, right? Because it's not something that's being, and it's also being, right? It's whatever. It's beyond that. It's this openness of being, so open that it's not open as opposed to that. It's it's breaking through the categories that have uh, hounded Western philosophy, dualistic philosophy. We say, why is there being instead of non-being? And our whole philosophical, you know, history has been trying to wrestle with that right up till today. You know, and the Buddhists or the Taoists might say, well, who says so? That's only an issue because that's how your mind is thinking it. Right? Why is there being instead of non-being? Because you think so. Who's created these categories of being and not being? You say, wait a minute, you just can't wipe out those categories just by saying that. I know, because you're really holding on to them as basic to your whole, right? But we can be playful with that. We can soften that. We can give it away. Um, all being arises in non-being. Being and non-being interpenetrate. In other words, there's not one or the other. Just like there's not you or me, we're one reality beyond our mind's ability to perceive our separate, our unity. Being and non-being is the underlying nature of this utter openness beyond our mind's ability to grasp that, and so we have to let go. And we have to learn again to be utterly open. Right? Not in the stupid way, saying, well, I don't care, I'm just going to open. No, openness is an energy, right? It's an awareness of being. It's a joy of being once we surrender all of the unrealized fixations, representations that our mind carries. Um, Finally, everything in the world arises in being, being arises in non-being, being and non-being interpenetrate, concealing and revealing each other in mutual interdependence. Concealing and revealing each other in mutual interdependence. In other words, I can look into the heart of being and see non-being, emptiness, openness. If I relax and look into the heart of what I think I'm seeing, it opens up into emptiness or openness. On the other hand, I can look into non-being and say, oh, all I find is the arising of being, of expression. Again, if I'm not a philosopher saying, oh, now I see, now I've got that right, how do I make use of this? Relax. Begin to understand what it means to begin to practice this openness, and yet also being able to appreciate that there is some real support, thinking support behind this. It's not just like, there are such wonderful, we're gifted such beautiful traditions of seeing and teaching that are great supports to us. They need to be. We need them, right? Great supports to us in a world where all the other information that's coming in is not serving. Okay. One last thing. It's a funny thing. This idea of just dropping it all, each moment, just drop it. Just drop it. You can take, again, another simple exercise. I remember we had a wonderful Buddhist teacher, here, and uh, Brendan Kennedy, Dzogchen teacher, and he would always talk about drop it. He would do this gesture with his arms. He'd say, just you can just practice whatever you're carrying, whatever you're holding on about. Just imagine going, ah, just lift your arms and go, ah, and shake your head and just drop it all. Just drop it. There's a saying in Zen. I'll leave you with these two things. There's a saying in Zen. An old Zen master said, as you go through the world, be a dead man, totally dead. Then everything you do will be good. Right? And by that he meant is really saying, just drop it. Don't just, all right, now I've died. Now let me just be here and do. On a more humorous note, basically same thing. And this is the koan, or this is the practice I'll leave you with, in the spirit of everything we've been talking about. Da Frijan says in one of his books, he says, his advice to his students is, get out of bed and drop dead. So each morning, get out of bed and drop dead. And he means it in the spirit of the other. Okay. So it's like, oh, all right, drop it. Give it away. Open. The Tao is basically utterly open. Okay. And we'll continue on from there next week. As I say, next week and the week after, and then the week after that, we may have to take a 2 week break for other things that I'm doing. But I'll see you the next 2 weeks at least. All right. Many blessings. If you have questions that you didn't express here, you can email them to me. If you want a copy of any of the recordings, you can also email, let me know. All right. Take care.
Good night. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Good night.